Have you ever run into a problem in programming that you just couldn't figure out? Sure, we all have. The question is, where do you go for help? Unless you're fortunate enough to work with a more senior software developer who is willing to help you out, it can seem daunting to find the right information online. Then, if you post a question, more often than not, it seems like people get mad at you for asking a poor question, which is even more frustrating. In this video, I'm going to walk you through how to get real help from people on the internet without them getting mad at you. Now, in case you didn't know me, my name is Tim Corey, and it's my goal to make learning software development easier, especially for C# developers. If you'd like to know more about how I can help you out, click on the link in the description to join my mailing list. As a bonus, you'll also get insider access to special discounts on my courses when they come out. So if you have a software development problem, where do you start? Your instinct might be to start here at stackoverflow.com. Now, if you haven't heard about Stack Overflow, it's the largest online community for software developers to get help. And that sounds like the right place to be, right? Well, yes and no. Yes, in the sense that this is where you're going to ask the question if you really need help. But no in the sense that's not the place to start. The place to start is to start by being a good citizen first. And what do I mean by that? Well, if you ask for help as the first thing you do online, it looks like all you're interested in is how can everybody else help me? And that immediately puts people on their edge. Because people who just say me, that's not someone who you want to serve. That's not someone who seems like they're just kind of stuck and they need help. So let's start by creating an account on Stack Overflow. Not when you need a question answered, but right now. Create an account on Stack Overflow. Now I have my account here. I've been obviously on Stack Overflow for a while. Stack Overflow gives you points for good answers, for good questions, for a whole bunch of things. But those are the primary ones. And so the more points you have, the better your reputation is online and the more likely people listen to you. Now, that's not to say that if you have a low reputation, no one will listen to you. That's not true. I'm going to work you through how to ask in a way that even if you have a reputation of 1, as in just started, people will still listen to you most likely. But again, you probably shouldn't ask a question if your reputation is 1, because you haven't given anything back to the community first. So, how do you give back to the community? Once you create your account, go over to questions and start looking at the questions. Now, this is all questions, and they're the newest right here. Now, there's tons of questions on Stack Overflow, and a lot of them are very detailed. Okay? System.data.SQL client is not supported on this platform. This is C#, ASP.NET Core. Maybe you don't know anything about ASP.NET Core and SQL Server. So that's not the right question for you. Neither is this Angular possibly. Maybe you are a C# person, but you're more of a C# WinForms person. Now what I do is when this whole list is up here, again, I probably don't know most of these, but I could click on one of my favorite tags, which is C#, because I know a lot about C#. And even if you don't know a lot about C#, but you know the most about C# of any language, for example, you could click on this. And now, this is the newest ones that are tagged C#. Now, a tag is just an indication that this question relates to this tag. This question right here relates to C# and SQL Server and ASP.NET Core and database migrations. This one, C# and PHP. So you can kind of look through this list. Well, here's one, C# parallel.forEach using async await. All right, so here's a question. There's some code, and there's no answers yet. So you could read through this, and maybe if you understand it, you could post an answer. Okay? Now the important thing here is don't just put a simple answer. Instead, give as much detail as possible in your answer, not as a link, So if you have a link that says, hey, I think this link answers your question, that's great, and put the link there, but also put the answer that answers their question below it. And say, hey, I got this right from this article. So you make sure you give credit where credit's due, but that way the answer is in the actual answer here, not just on the link, because links expire over time, or they go away or whatever. And so you want the actual answer here, because don't forget, you're not just answering this person, you're answering the next person who has the same or a similar question. So that's kind of step one, is whenever possible, answer questions. When I first started out in Stack Overflow, what I did was I spent about half an hour a night for, 2 or 3 nights a week for probably 6 months just answering questions. I'd come and I'd search through, all the ones for C#. And I go, okay, kind of exhausted that. Maybe I'll search for Log4Net. I know Log4Net pretty well as well. And look for any without answers or without accepted answers. And then I'd say, okay, I kind of answered those. Now let's look for SQL and then JavaScript and then, AngularJS or whatever. And I'd have my list of favorites, which you can edit. So you can add more tags if you want. But I'd have that list and I'd go through and just click on them and read through the questions. Because look at, when it comes to Angular, it's just AngularJS. No, I'm sorry, JavaScript. So JavaScript has a question asked 3 minutes ago, 4 minutes ago, 7 minutes ago, 13 minutes ago, 17 minutes, 21 minutes, 20. There's a lot of questions in the past half hour. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 questions in half an hour. That means if I'm going to work on the couch for half an hour, there'll probably be 7 more that come in that time. So I can go through a lot of questions and, again, just answer the ones I understand. But that way I can put answers right away. So they ask them, 3 minutes ago, I can answer that question and have it up for them within 10 minutes. Which really makes Stack Overflow happy because people are asking questions and getting answers right away. And it gives you, first of all, a satisfaction of helping somebody, but it also allows you to get that reputation. Now notice, 1 reputation, 1 reputation, 1 reputation, 3 reputation. Okay, so a lot of these people that are asking, this is the first step they took. I would encourage you not to be one of these people. Because, again, when you look at that, you say, oh, the first thing you did was ask me for help. Okay, so that's step 1. Become a good citizen. Answer some questions now so that later, when you have a question, people are more likely to see you as trying to work through this and trying to help out and give back. Okay, so now we have this question we need to get answered. The next thing to do is not to ask it. Okay, there's this big blue button that's begging you to push it. Ask question. Don't push it yet. Instead, you need to identify specifically what you need. And that word specifically is really, really important. So, if you ask the question, how can I get information into C#? That is an awful question. And the reason why is because it's so generic, I can't answer it. So if I'm on the other end of this, I can't give you an answer that's going to help you. So instead, you have to be very specific. You have to identify the keywords in that question. You have to identify supporting information. So let's talk through this. Let's say that I am working in WPF in C# and I'm trying to get information into a data grid and I'm using Caliburn Micro. Okay, so these are some things that, I do. Okay, I'm working with Caliburn Micro and I'm putting information in data grid and I just can't figure out how to get this data grid to work. All right, now again, that's still kind of general, but there's some important things specifically that can pull out of this need. First of all, let's list them. I'm in C#. That's important because you're not in Java, you're not in JavaScript, you're not in SQL, you're not in Go or anything else. You're in C#. Second of all, I'm using WPF. Okay? So I'm not using WinForms, I'm not using Console, I'm not using ASP.NET. Okay, ASP.NET has a data grid. Well, it's not the same thing as the one in WPF. What else? Well, I'm using Caliburn Micro, which is an MVVM framework. Okay, those are important pieces as well because they're again, we're drilling down to a very, very specific situation here. And finally, I'm looking at the data grid. Okay, so now just with those 5 words and phrases, a person coming in knows exactly what you're trying to do, at least as far as the technology you're working with. Now, when you ask your question, they have it framed in a very, very specific bit of technology. You're working with C#, WPF, Caliburn Micro, which is an MVVM framework, and you're trying to use the data grid. Okay, that's your specificity. So now you can start looking at your question, which is, how do I load data into the data grid? Okay, but again, that question is a bad question if that's all you ask. When you have a supporting information, it clicks. Okay, so we've identified some specifics, which are the keywords, and now we should identify a supporting information. Okay, and by supporting information, I mean this question on its own doesn't show that you've made any type of progress in searching on your own. So the first thing we need to do is actually start the search on our own. Okay, so what I would do is I'd go to Google. Actually, probably Bing, but I use Bing. So I would say C#, WPF, Caliburn Micro, and I might put that in quotes. And I'll leave MVVM off because people know Caliburn Micro and know it's an MVVM framework. Data grid, load. Okay, so there's my specifics, C#, WPF, Caliburn Micro, data grid, and the one other keyword is I'm trying to load information. So those are the keywords. Let's see what Bing comes up with. All right, automatically updating a data grid. Guess what? That's stackoverflow.com. Okay, and here's 4 more Stack Overflows. All right, and as you can see, this was a purple one because it actually clicked it already. All right. Okay, this person has a question about how to get information into a data grid. All right, this probably answers your question. So if it does not, one of the things I would do is, especially since it's Stack Overflow, is I would copy this and I'd paste this link in here, and I would say, maybe right above it, I tried this, but it does not work in my situation because, and explain why. Okay? That way, when people look at your question, they're going to go, oh, he actually did Google this. He tried something that seemed like it might work, and it didn't because of this. And it gives them more information, but it also shows, hey, you're trying something. All right, so I would go through and I would do a couple different searches. I'd search as many as I could that seemed like it made sense. How to load data in the data grid and WPF application. That might work. Again, it's Stack Overflow. So here's a little bit of code, but it looks like this is not MVVM, and so it's not Caliburn Micro, but it is WPF. So this might not work, but it might give you a little bit of information to try. And the key here is you need to try first. Your first response should not be ask somebody else to do it for me, because that will tick people off like nothing else. You'll get your question downvoted. You'll get, you'll lose points on Stack Overflow because even if it's a valid question, if you haven't tried something first, it shows no effort on your part, and the question becomes, why should I do work on your part when you're not willing to do work on your part. So make sure that you do some work. All right. The other thing I would do after I'm done this Google search, after I've looked through and I've exhausted at least the first 2 pages, I'd say, hey, there's my video. Read that and see if it has it on data grid. Hint, it doesn't. I didn't cover data grid. That's one of the questions people ask about. And that will be coming up in a future video, just so you know. But I thought it'd be a good question to ask. So, if you exhaust the first couple pages and it seems like, say, all these are not relevant, then probably page 3 won't be relevant. But if you get a couple in here that are relevant, then maybe try page 3. But if you're in page 5, 6, and 7, you're probably not getting good results. Okay, it's probably not covering what you need it to. But you know what? It might be. Who knows? So do what seems like it's okay, but definitely go through at least 2 pages, maybe 3, before you even consider stopping. All right? So that's one part. You've Googled the question using your specific keywords that you pulled out, and you didn't find information or you didn't find the full picture. The other thing you should do is you should show any type of code that you have that you tried. Okay, so I'd write that down as Notepad as well. Any kind of code that you did, let's just, simulate, insert code here, that you tried, so that you can show people, hey, this is what I'm trying and it's not working. Okay, because then, again, it shows effort on your part. It shows like, I didn't just say, someone tell me how to do this. I worked at it. I tried this code, it didn't work. I Googled and they had some code, but that didn't really fit my situation because of this. So now when you ask the question, how do I load data in the data grid? Again, you have supporting information, you have good keywords, and you showed that you have really worked hard at this. So now that we've identified a question, we're just simulating here because we don't have a question yet. Because honestly, if we go back to Stack Overflow, there's 15 million questions on Stack Overflow, a lot of which have been answered. So if you think that your question about a topic is unique, most likely you are wrong. Most likely someone else has answered it. That's where these good keywords come into play. Because if you use good keywords, you're more likely to find those answers. Because there's an awful lot of answers or questions on Stack Overflow that get closed because they're like a similar question that's already been answered. So that's my first disclaimer, is just make sure that you do a really thorough search, both of Google or Bing, whichever you want to do, and also in Stack Overflow itself. Because you'll find there's an awful lot of answers here that probably fit your bill. But if they don't, and you're ready to ask the question, click the button, and then it seems simple. There's 3 spots to fill in. But it really isn't quite that simple. Okay? The first thing you have to do is craft a really good title. Even though this is the question, that's not a good enough question. Again, it even tells you, be specific. So I might say something like, in C#, how do I load data into the data grid in WPF using Caliburn Micro? Okay, now notice when I type that question, and there's the question mark. When I type that question, it pulled up some potential questions that have already been asked. The next step you need to do is check through these and make sure that you've already looked at all of these and that none of them satisfy your question. If none of them do, then go on and fill in your question body. This is where you're going to ask a more full question. This is the summary question. The really punchy, short, I'm trying to do this. Now notice I did put a few keywords in here, WPF, Caliburn Micro, C#. But you want to have the more full question here. This is what I'm trying to do. This is not working. And then you bring in your supporting information. I did try the information on this post, but it didn't work because of this. And that's what you've documented here. And then here's the code that I'm using, and it didn't seem to work. Then down here, you have your tags. Well, C#. Now it's going to auto suggest some for me. You want the big one, the one that has 1 almost 2 million, I believe it's subscribers. Or maybe it's questions, I'm not sure. But the big number is better. So C# and then WPF. Again, select that. Then Caliburn Micro. Whoops. Caliburn, and notice it's Caliburn.micro. That's the one you want. Again, the biggest number. All right, and that will tell you more about it. So, okay, it's questions that it's been tagged in. So it's been tagged in 1,600 questions. So yes, that's the one. And then also MVVM. Again, almost 22,000 questions. And finally, data grid. All right, and that's 13,000 questions. There's data grid view, but that's probably different. It's not the one that we're working with Windows Form. Instead, it's probably either the data grid or WPF data grid, but that only has 2,000 questions. But that is the new and improved one. All right, so the question is, which one do you use? We'll use that one. So tags, 5, up to 5, use as many as you can. All right, but don't use non-descriptive tags. So don't put Windows on this question. Don't put, programming. Those are way too broad. You want as specific as possible. Even though that means the number of questions are tagged in is smaller, that's okay because the people who can answer those are patrolling out those smaller pools. Okay, so that's the 5 tags I'd put on this question. And again, I'd fill in a whole lot of details here. So be very specific in your title. Be very, very specific and clear. Don't say I need help. Don't, just that. Don't say, can you fix this for me? Say specifically in one sentence what your problem is. And use keywords to kind of narrow that down, especially your programming language. Because again, every language is on Stack Overflow. So this would be different if it was Java, or if it was JavaScript, or if it was, something else. So be very specific there. Then have all the relevant details possible in the body. Make sure it's neat and clean. Don't just paste junk in there and have it be all over the place. Okay, format it. This little editor here is great for making sure you make nice, neat formats. Now, if you have some code that, it's kind of a bigger block, what you can do is create a gist. So you go to gist.github.com. And what this is you give it a description. So I'd call it maybe, non-working Caliburn Micro data grid code, or something like that. And then paste your code here, and you can paste multiple files. So you can give it a file name, paste your code. If you want to add another file, you can. Once you do that, it'll create a link for you when you either say create public gist, which is what you want, or a secret gist. Secret gist you probably don't want, especially not for Stack Overflow, since you're asking someone for your help. When you do that, see, here's one I created. This is a while ago, 6 years ago. So I created this, little gist just to kind of show some information. I create it, and now I can share this link. Okay, so I can do the embed code, or I can do the URL. I believe the embed code will work with Stack Overflow. I'm not positive. What you can do is put it in there and see if it works. If it doesn't, use the share code. Either way, just copy it, come back over here, and paste it in. And that way people can go to that gist and make sure you mark it as a link. Like so. And then they can go to this link and they can see your full code. All right. So that's one of the things I do. Again, gist.github.com. Or if you've got JavaScript or something like that that runs in the browser, HTML, CSS, then you'd go to CodePen. Which is codepen.io. Right? And it's the same kind of thing. It creates a gist. The only difference is that it actually allows people to run the code and see how it works, since it's a HTML, CSS, or JavaScript. So that's kind of nice. And you can see some working pens here if you wanted to, or you can create your own. And then you can just link that right into your post. So those are things you can do. And again, finally add really good tags, really specific tags, and yet the biggest one of them. So I use data grid, not WPF data grid. And make sure you use 5 if they're all relevant. If they're not relevant, don't use 5. Now, I want to show you one that I asked because I think that it will give you a good picture of a question format. And I'll leave a link to this down in the description as well. But this is a question that I had. So I was in Azure, and I was doing an Azure blob put command, and it was generating errors when it used to work. Okay, so that's the issue I'm having. Now notice how I formatted this. This is the initial problem. I debugged the process as best I can, but I seem to be stuck. So here's the process I'm going through. Here's the error I'm getting. Here's the request that I'm making of the server. Here's the actual put command. And here's the SAS key that it generates, which is an important part of it. And then here is the code. Okay, C# code and my JavaScript code. And then this is what's happening. And here's any other thoughts I have. I'm not sure if it would generate the error if the container already existed, whatever. Okay? And then my 5 tags, JavaScript, C#, Cordova, Azure, and Azure Storage Blobs. All right? So I asked this question. Again, I format it in such a way that it's very clear that I'm not just saying, help me. I'm saying, I'm stuck. And believe it or not, people on the internet love to help others. Okay? It seems like they don't when they get all angry and downvote you and yell at you and say your question's bad. But when you ask a good question and when you show that you're willing to put the work in, it's just you're over your head in something. They are willing to help you out and are happy to do so. So what I did is I posted this question. Now notice I posted this on November 11th at 1943. At 20:06, so we're talking 23 minutes later, I get this. This is a comment. Now notice, this is 20:06 at 20:11. So 5 minutes later, I respond to that comment. Then I get another comment 9 minutes later. 1 minute later, the other person posts a comment as well. And then 4 minutes later, another post. And then about 30 minutes later, I actually responded. Okay? Now, what that is showing you is when I posted this, I was ready to be available for questions. And that's another important thing. You really should not post this right before you go to bed. Because if someone 30 minutes in, or even 5 minutes in, but again, remember, when you're being a good citizen, you're kind of watching those early posts just as they come on and trying to answer them quickly. So if someone's doing that for you and you wait a day to respond, you kind of lost that. And maybe that person doesn't have time to come back. Or maybe they're on to the next project, or they're on their weekend now, or whatever. So I always recommend that you dedicate between 1 and 2 hours, not where you're sitting there watching it, because you can get the alerts in your phone or in your email, but that you're at least checking in every 15 minutes or so, and you're available to try things out and to respond to questions for the first hour or two. After that, it's okay to wait a couple hours or even half a day if you're kind of, either out of the office or you're going home to go to sleep or whatever. But don't post this at the end of your day before you leave work or before you go to sleep. Give it some time so that you can make sure you're available. So what I recommend is if you're working late at night, get the post ready, but don't post it until the next morning. That way you're available. Now, we went through this and a couple of different people had some suggestions for me. And one of them seemed right. This person's right here. I respond to comments. Yep, that looks as right. So post this as an answer and I'll give you credit for it. Because here, it resolved my issue. I was double encoding a string. Now I'm not double encoding it and it works again. So this person took their comment and posted it as an actual answer. When they did, I accepted the answer. Now that's important. When you get the answer, you're not done. You have to come back and accept an answer. This is one of those things that, again, will give you a bad reputation online. If you ask questions, people answer them, and you fix your problem and just go away, never come back, then you have not given them reputation, because this gives them reputation. You have not told others if it worked or not, and you've not given them any kind of vote, which again gives them reputation. So I said, hey, I can't mark this comment as the answer, or this one, I did mark it up, but I can't mark this as an answer, so you gotta actually post it as an answer. So I asked him to do that. Once he did, or she, I'm not quite sure. Once they did, then I marked it as the answer, and I posted down below in the comments what I did and how it was resolved. And then I also uploaded it. That way, everything was very clear that this is the right answer, at least in my situation. And I have given this person as much reputation as I can as a thank you. So that's how you respond once you've asked the question. You monitor your post, you respond to comments as soon as possible, and then when you get a possible answer like this one, I went and tried it. Okay? That's again, that availability. I didn't just say, that sounds right. I didn't say, I don't think that'll work. I actually tried it. When it did work, I came back and said, go ahead and make that the answer, and I'll recommend, or I will vote it as the correct answer. Now, there are times where you post a question and then you say, oh, I found the answer, but no one really helped me with that. I just found it on my own. In fact, let's go to, I'll leave that and delete that post. I've got a question, this one right here. So I had this question about Angular Dragula without using required.js. Now, if you don't know what any of those words mean, no problem. But I had this question. Again, it's a smaller question, and so I didn't have all supporting information because it wasn't really necessary. So I had the question. Here's a little bit of supporting information. The author seems to think it's simple, and there's the link to that discussion, and it's shut down similar questions as well. But I've looked at the code and don't see how to load the module. So can you help me? Well, in the meantime, I was still working on the problem. And so I came up with the answer on my own, mostly. But what I did was I posted my own answer and gave all the specifics and then marked my own answer as the correct one. Now, I would not do this if somebody else had come close, but no one else really came close. However, I did mention that other people had helped me. Okay, so I was very clear that I'm not just doing this on my own. I mentioned that, yeah, this is kind of helped me, that kind of helped me. And here is the resulting full answer. So if no one answers your question or comes close to it, but you do find the answer, you answer your question and then mark it as the suggested answer. Because notice, 22 people have voted that this is a good answer. So it's not just me. I've helped 22 people at least with this answer. Which means that if I didn't post this and I just posted my question, I figured the answer out myself and just went away, then 22 people at least will be going, well, what do I do? Now they have the full answer. Okay? So that's, again, how to be a good citizen in both cleaning up your questions by answering them if no one else does and you figure it out, and also by giving full explanations with code when relevant. All right, so we've gone through Stack Overflow, and we've seen how to ask the right question, okay, by asking a full question, by using our keywords, by making sure that our question that we ask also has good keywords in it, and making sure we have good supporting information. We've also seen how to search through Bing or Google to make sure that we can't answer our own question because there's an awful lot of information out there that will probably help us. We've seen how to search through Stack Overflow as well, and also how to be a good citizen on Stack Overflow before we have these problems that come up that we really need help on. Because when we're helping others, others are more willing to help us. Okay? Now, when you sign up for Stack Overflow, you will not have access to do everything that I can do. Okay? Because the more reputation you have, the more trusted you are. But if you go to the Help section, go to Help Center, and go to Privileges right down here, and select the full list of privileges. Now, mine are kind of faded out because I've achieved all these. Only 3 left. But when you start out, you can post questions and answers. But it's not until you get to 15 reputation you can vote up. All right? And you can't comment everywhere until you hit 50 reputation. So there's going to be some limitations, which means that you want to get through at least 50 reputation before you have that first question, because you want to be able to leave comments. The key here is if you can't leave a comment, don't leave it as an answer and say, well, I don't have the reputation to leave it as a comment. That's not okay. So make sure that you have at least 50 reputation. Reputation comes quickly. Every time a person votes up an answer, it gives you 10 reputation. Every time a person votes up one of your questions, saying it's a good question, you get 5 points. So, getting 50, not really that hard if you've got a few questions on there and a few answers and maybe even a question or two. But you want to get the answers in first because you want that reputation to move you up to 50. So 5 good answers is what you want. Okay? And if they select your answer as the correct one, you get more reputation as well. I'm not sure how much, I forget. But with that, you'll quickly move up the ranks. Now, if you leave bad answers or ask bad questions, and by bad, I don't just mean inappropriate. It may be a question like, help me do my homework. Those kind of things. You'll lose reputation. If we go to questions right now, we'll probably find a few that have negative reputation. There's one that had -1. Let's go back to that one. So first of all, it's not in English, which that in itself is not necessarily a problem. But if at all possible, post it in English, because that's where the majority of developers will be able to understand. Okay, I understand there's large communities of developers who speak another language, but a lot of them also speak English, which I find incredibly impressive, especially for speaking English in a tech field. But that's another story. So if you can, post it in English. But for whatever reason, at least one person thought this was a bad question. Now, I can't even read it, so I can't comment on that. So that person lost reputation because of that. So just be aware of that. I can't show you. I don't think I've lost any reputation in a while. Every once in a while I do, and it's not the end of the world. Okay, someone says, nope, that was a bad answer. Yep, here's one. So 117 people said this is a great answer. One person said, no, it's not. Okay, guess what? It's the internet. People are going to be negative. It's okay. It's not the end of the world. The key is to not give them fodder by doing something poor. Okay? So don't give them the opportunity. Don't give good people the opportunity to have to downvote you. Because I have downvoted questions. I've said, you know what? That's not a good question. And I've downvoted it. I feel bad, but the reality is, in order to keep Stack Overflow clean, we have to get rid of bad questions and inappropriate or bad answers. And so just make sure that you're asking good questions. Okay, so to recap, start off by being a good citizen. Join Stack Overflow, answer some questions. Right off the bat, just spend a little bit of time, over time, answering questions whenever possible. Number 2, when you identify you've got a problem and you don't understand how to fix it, start by identifying this key information, what the keywords are, what the specific question you have is, figure out any code that goes along with it, what's not working. Then Google it or Bing it and look through all the answers. If you find a post, for example, this post right here, don't just read the top answer, read all the answers, including the one that was -1, and also all the comments. Because sometimes the little nugget that's going to help you will be in a comment, not in the answer. Okay? So go through all those. If there's ones that are close, especially on Stack Overflow, but aren't quite right, but they'd seem like they're right, make sure to put that in your supporting information. Say, I tried this, it doesn't hit my situation exactly, or it doesn't work in my environment, whatever. Once you have all of that, and once you've searched Bing or Google at least 2 or 3 pages in, if not more, then go ahead and craft carefully your question on Stack Overflow. Great title with keywords, great tags that are specific, and then all the information about your question, separate in those sections. Like I said, this is very easy to read, at least in my mind, because it pulls out these different pieces so that you know exactly what you're looking at. Okay, here's the error that I'm getting. Okay, here's the request that I'm making. And so it's very clear these are the different parts of my question. That's the supporting parts. Okay, once you have all of that, make sure that when you post it, that you post it and a time when you have time to wait for answers or wait for comments so that you can respond to those. And if you need to, you can even edit your question. Okay, so if you don't have a reputation to post a comment, or if someone posts a comment that seems relevant but it's not really, but you have to explain more, edit your question, put down here, edit, and then explain why you're editing it. Say, okay, I'm adding this information because the question was raised. What about this? But that doesn't work because I'm using Calibre and Micro, not just straight WPF or whatever. And maybe give some supporting code for that. So edit your question if possible or if needed. Once you get an answer that works and you've tested it out and it works, make sure to mark it as the answered question and give it a positive reputation of one, at least, bump it up. So you just push this button, it'll highlight this, and it'll give them one more upvote. Okay, you can't give more than one upvote, just one per person. Don't try and game the system. Okay, but upvote that. If there's other answers that gave part of the answer or that gave an answer if you were in a different situation, give them an upvote if it makes sense. Okay, but mark the correct one for you with the check mark. Okay, mark it as the answer. So make sure you do all of that, and you are much, much, much more likely to get help on the internet and not get the angry retorts, not get the downvotes, not get the negativity that a lot of, especially newer developers, associate with asking for help online. Now, if you have a specific C# question, or maybe it's you're learning something, you're just not quite sure what it means, it's not really a specific question as in this is not working and how do I get it to work, but more like, what is an interface? Or, what is unit testing? How does it work? In that case, especially if you are a subscriber to my email list, go ahead and either post it on my YouTube channel under the appropriate video if you're working through that video, or email me directly if not, and I will do my best to answer you. Now, obviously, I can't answer the entire world's questions, but I've kept up so far with the questions you guys have been asking. And believe me, I get, probably a dozen a week or so, larger questions, more than just, hey, appreciate your channel, which I love those as well. But what I've started doing, if you go to iamtimcorey.com and go to the blog, so iamtimcorey.com/blog, you can follow this if you'd like. I'm also going to start putting it out as a newsletter. But what I've started to do is when I get a question, I'll go ahead and answer it as a blog post and then link to that blog post either in the email or in the YouTube comment section or the my Facebook group comment section. And so this way you get a more full explanation of your question. So what does a full stack developer mean? This is the one I answered today. And so I'll explain it. So here's what a front-end developer means, a back-end developer, and now we know those two, here's what a full-stack developer looks like. You can leave a comment down here as well, but this way, you get the more full explanation. If a coworker asks you, you can send them the link, and it just makes it simpler for everybody, and it allows everyone to have access to these questions, because if you're asking the question, or if you're thinking the question, you're not alone. There's a lot of people that have the same question. Not everyone asks these questions. So if you ask it and I answer it, we're not going to help just one person. We're going to help multiple. So again, if it relates to C# and it's either, on one of my videos that I'm talking about something you have a question on, or if it's, not really related to a video, but you had a question that you can't find online or don't really understand, ask me. I will do my best to answer, and I'll probably create a blog post for this. I've got a schedule of about another 30 or so that I've answered in the past that I'm putting out. But if something comes up in the meantime, I'll go ahead and create a one-off post for you and shoot you that link. Okay? So that's, again, if you're a C# developer and have some questions. Because I don't answer questions about other languages necessarily, just because I don't use a whole lot of other languages. I'm mostly C# and JavaScript. Those are my two big ones, as well as SQL. So I guess that's a third. But I have dabbled in other languages, but I'm definitely not an expert in, say Objective-C or something like that. So with that being said, let me know what you think down below. Let me know if you have any questions about this video, ironically, and let me know how you make out when asking questions. Again, go through the whole process. Don't just go right to asking the question, but let me know how you make out. And hey, you know what? In the comment below, link to a Stack Overflow question that you have that you've asked. And maybe I'll look it over, and if it's a good question, I'll upvote it for you, give you a hand that way. I'm not going to just upvote any question, but one that's a good question. And maybe if I have the answer to it, I could even answer it. So we'll try that as well. All right? So until next time, I am Tim Corey.